Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for being here this afternoon. I do know that at least one person has got to leave early, and please just go if anybody needs to before the end. So, starting from the top, apologies for absence. So far, I have Councillors Ash, Butters, Eddy, Jacobs, Varney, Goggin, and also James Mason, our independent person. Are there any other names to add to that list?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Ali, she just left last night, the hospital operation. So she's not coming today.
Okay, thank you. Right, the next item is over to you, Simon, for the emergency evacuation procedure.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, we're not expecting a fire alarm test today, so if it does actuate, if we would like to leave our seats and exit through the rear of the building, congregating at the rear of the fire station itself. This is an operational fire station, and as such, we may be hearing an alarm call for a fire alarm. If that if that is the case, we will pause the meeting because there will be some movement and appliances will be moving from the front of the fire station itself. Allow them to make their way and then recommence the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Next item is declaration of interests, and I haven't received any so far. No. Right, thank you. Public access, again, none received that I'm aware of. No. Okay, so Chair's business. I'm going to welcome you all to the meeting and confirm for the record that this Fire Authority meeting is taking place as a face-to-face meeting, and we are recording the meeting for the public to view. And I'd like to express our thanks to Station Manager Nick Ludwig and the crews at Hicks Fire Station for their help today and also for accommodating the meeting. Also thanks to Vaughan Jenkins and David Pike for recently stepping up to support the authority and the service while the Assistant Chief Fire Officer recruitment was undertaken. So, can I go around now, please, for the record? Oh, yes, sorry, one thing I forgot before I go on to the next stage. I must inform you all that our Treasurer, Danielle Neal, has announced that she will be leaving the authority on the 31st of March this year.
31st December.
Sorry, why did I say March? I'm so sorry. Don't know where I picked that one up from. 31st of December, 22. We wish her all the best for the future, and the clerk will raise an urgent item of business after item 15 and before we go into exempt session, which will cover this. Thank you. So, can I ask all members to introduce themselves to start with? I think if we go round your way first, please.
Councillor David Wilcox from Bristol, representing Lockleys Ward.
Councillor Shelley Bromley, Western in Bath and North East Somerset Council.
Adam Monk, representing Filton on South Gloss.
Richard Tucker, North Somerset Council, Western-super-Mare Milton.
Brian Hopkinson, District Councillor for South Gloucestershire, I'm representing Cribbs and Charlton Hayes.
Councillor Don Davis, Pill Ward Councillor, North Somerset Council.
Councillor Ben Nutland, Councillor for Yate North, South Gloucestershire Council.
Councillor Yasin Mahmood, Lawrence Hill, Bristol City Council.
Steve Smith, Westbury and Henleys Ward on Bristol City Council.
Robert Payne, Councillor for Western-super-Mare Central, North Somerset Council. Paul May, I'm a Baines Councillor, I represent Whitchurch and Penswood, and I'm the champion for this fire station, which is a really, really great fire station. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Brown, Stoke Gifford Ward, represents South Gloucester.
No, I didn't introduce myself. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name's Councillor Brenda Massey. I represent Southmead Ward in Bristol. Right, and then can I ask officers to introduce themselves? So I'll go around the alternative way this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Simon Shilton, your Chief Forester and Chief Executive.
Good afternoon, members. My name's Kevin Woodward. I am the interim treasurer. I've signed a contract for 6 months to help through Danielle's absence and know the news that she has resigned until the 31st of December.
Good afternoon, Angie Feeney, Director of Corporate Services.
Good afternoon, Steve Imrie, one of the Assistant Chiefs.
Tanya Nathan, Head of Procurement.
Claire Bentley, Head of Finance. I think that's me. Amanda Brown, Clerk to Avon Fire Authority.
Thank you. And can I remind everybody to use your microphone when you're speaking, and also remember to turn it off when you're finished, please. Okay, if there's any voting required, it will take place as follows. I will ask members for to raise their hands, votes against, abstentions, and show of hands for all members voting for. Right, moving on, item 6.1 on the agenda are the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Avon Fire Authority held on the 22nd of June 2022. And I move those are a correct record. Yep.
Can we have a seconder, please? Don.
Thank you, Don. Okay.
Are the members voting for the minutes? Show of hands. Are you voting for the minutes?
No, yes. Your hand. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think there's none against, are there? No. No abstentions, no show up. Okay. So, minutes of the ordinary audit, governance and ethics meeting held on the 11th of February 2022. On the next one's Councillor Goggins, obviously not here.
I think Councillor Payne, were you present at the AGEP meeting?
Yes, I was, yeah. So
Would you mind proposing the minutes for us?
Happy to propose the minutes.
Thank you.
And a seconder, please. Lovely, thank you, Richard. Next item 7.
To get those passed?
Oh, sorry, yes. Well, those who were there. I don't know who was there. Was it just... Right.
Any objections? Any abstentions? Everyone in favour? Okay.
Right. Thank you. Right. Next item, 7.2, minutes of the ordinary meeting of the local pension board held on the 25th of February. Councillor Smith, will you move those?
I think this is one of those strange things. So at the local pension board, we had 2 elected members who are now no longer members of the Fire Authority. But your last meeting approved these minutes. So I think you are the last man standing.
Well, in that case, on the basis that my colleagues approved it who were there, then I'm happy with that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's not normally as complicated as this. It really isn't. Right, 7.3, minutes of the ordinary meeting of the People and Culture Committee held on the 4th of March 2022. Councillor Wilcox.
I would like to approve those minutes.
Okay, and are you seconding? Thank you. Any other members that were there present agree? Yeah? Yeah.
No abstentions, no objections?
Okay. Right. In that case, those are agreed. Right, 7.4, the ordinary meeting of the Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee held on the 21st of April 2022. Councillor Payne?
Yes, I'm happy to propose the minutes.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Thank you. And all those in favour? Right. Okay, anybody against? Any abstentions? No. Okay, good. Right.
Chair, Paul May, can I just raise a query that the minutes of the performance review and scrutiny, we've got a meeting on Friday. Having these approved today, does that mean we can't change them if there were a query on Friday?
These were the minutes that were approved at the last PRSC meeting. So you're absolutely right. We don't bring them to the Fire Authority until they've been approved at committee. So you're fine, but this was from the meeting before, so they've already been approved. Okay.
Thank you. We did seem to have quite a lot of minutes of meetings to approve today for some reason. Okay, the next item I believe is down to the clerk to present.
Thank you, Chair. So unusually, I think this is the first time I've had to raise such an item on the agenda. Unusually, I've had to take urgent action on the Fire Authority's behalf under Standing Order 4.1 of your Constitution. So the papers are in the bundle, so if I refer you first to page 59, and you will see that the first urgent decision I took on your behalf was on the 13th of July. And to give this a bit of context, at the annual general meeting on the 22nd of June, in exempt session, you approved the award of a Microsoft licensing contract. And you'll probably remember, I think Tanya was here and presented the paper to you. And I remember a discussion about how reasonable the bid was. Well, as it turns out, it was too reasonable, because when you voted to approve that contract and Tanya took away the action to award it, we discovered that the bidder had put wrong figures in their bid, and they were not willing to hold to that bid anymore. So we then had a dilemma, because it was very urgent that we arranged a new contract before the Microsoft licenses bill went through the roof, basically. So I was asked whether, in those circumstances, I would consider urgent action. So what happened was the procurement department followed their normal process. They asked the bidder to resubmit with the right figures. They carried out a completely new rescoring exercise to work out who would be the top bidder, and it turned out to be another company. And I was asked, can we please go ahead, or do we have to convene an urgent Fire Authority meeting? So I consulted, as I'm required to do under standing orders, with your chair. And I also consulted with your vice chair, Councillor Davies, and also the chair of the Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Payne. And I emailed all three of those individuals and set out the problem. This is the problem. This is where we find ourselves. Please, would you authorise me to take urgent action? And all three of them, I have to say, checked their emails urgently, because they came back to me very quickly and said, yes, please go ahead. One of the conditions of delegated decisions is that I report it back to you as soon as possible, which is why it's on the agenda today, and it will also be covered in the exempt session when we get to it later. So that's the first decision I'm notifying you of. So this is just for noting, because the decision's been made. The second item is a decision I made on your behalf on the 16th of September. The 16th of September, you may recall, was a date I invited you to an extraordinary Fire Authority meeting. So we already had, I think it was a People and Culture meeting that day, and because I knew there was urgent business, I invited more members to come for an urgent extraordinary meeting. And the reason we needed that meeting was to approve the award of an occupational health contract, because the current contract was going to expire. And the reason the timings had slipped is this is a joint procurement exercise with other fire and rescue services, and because of that and the need to go back to the bidder of lots of questions, it had taken much longer than we had hoped. So again, I consulted with everyone. The paper went out for the meeting on the 16th September, so I haven't held back any information from members. I sent around an email to all members on the 14th of September telling you that I intended to make an urgent decision on your behalf on the date of the meeting, which had to be cancelled for the official morning period. I said, please let me have any objections. I think I answered some questions, Councillor, from you, and I had no objections, so I granted that contract on Friday, the 16th of September, which is when I'm confident you would have made the same decision had the meeting taken place, but of course it was delayed due to the morning period. So again, just letting you know about that, it will appear also in the exempt session. So are there any questions, or is everybody comfortable that they've been told everything they need? Councillor.
Yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with everything that's happened. But just as a comment, I took the role of procurement champion
on the authority. It's a conversation that I've had with Tanya as well, that I think there's room to have a look in the future at how much value it actually adds when these processes are carried out under very strict regulations, to then bring it back for what's essentially just a rubber stamp by this meeting at the end of it. If things are being done within budget or could be pre-approved by the authority, I think there's room to do it differently and avoid this kind of urgency of, oh God, we need to make a decision today.
Councillor, it's really helpful because we are considering a proper local government association-led governance review, and it's to dig into these sort of things. Are we having things on agendas that don't need to be on agendas if there are other processes in place? At the moment, the Constitution dictates we have to come back to you over 500k, and that's why you get these papers. But we are going to re-look at it all in the whole, just to make sure, like you say, we don't have rubber stamping exercises. So,
okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Super, thank you.
Right, so item 9 is the appointment of the new Assistant Chief Fire Officer, and I think that's down to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. So this is my paper at page 63 of your papers. The report summarises the recruitment process that was undertaken for a new Assistant Chief Fire Officer. That process concluded on the 9th of August, and it simply seeks your ratification of an appointment which has already been made by the People and Culture Committee. And the reason being, the Constitution says the Fire Authority as a whole should make these appointments. So that's why it's before you today. So the background to this matter is Simon Chilton, your Chief Fire Officer and Chief Executive, was appointed on the 1st of April. His appointment created a vacancy for an Assistant Chief Fire Officer. Under the terms of the Constitution, the People and Culture panel undertake that recruitment process on your behalf for Service Board and statutory officers. The financial implication sets out the salary, and then under key considerations, I can tell you that a meeting of People and Culture on the 18th of May approved the recruitment process. The advert went live. It was a good success rate. There were lots of applications. Shortlisting took place by members of People and Culture Committee, followed by various stages, including stakeholder engagement and business continuity exercise, a briefing and presentation to members, and then it culminated in an interview. And 3 candidates were invited to final interview. So the preferred candidate was Mr. Richard Welsh, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for South East Area Operations at London Fire Brigade, and he will be joining later this month. Simon, did you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. We had a very strong number of candidates that come into the process, so it was very competitive. A number of candidates had skills in a lot of different areas. Richard obviously was head and shoulders above other candidates in relation to his breadth and depth of experience and what he could potentially bring to our organisation. As you can see there in section 5.2, there's a bit of an appraisal of Richard's history within the fire sector, and in particular London Fire Brigade. So look forward to working with Richard, and he'll be a real asset to the Service Leadership Board. So thank you.
So that's my paper. Would you like to propose that appointment?
Yes, I'm happy to propose it, having been part of the panel that interviewed everybody, all the applicants, and it was a very good session. So I formally propose that. Thank you. Right.
Any abstentions? Any votes against? So all those voting to formally appoint Mr. Richard Welsh as Assistant Chief Fire Officer. Thank you very much.
It's unanimous.
Congratulations to Richard when he arrives.
Good. Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is the Revenue 2022-23 Budget Monitoring Report. And I believe that's going to be presented by the Temporary Treasurer with the Head of Finance. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As we've already established, I've only just joined the service and I've literally spent a handful of days with the authority. So if members will bear with me, on this occasion I'm going to ask Claire to take us through these reports, not because I'm trying to duck responsibility, but I wouldn't be able to do these reports justice. So I think Claire is best placed, but I look forward to working with the authority over the next 6 months.
Thank you. So if we take a look at the revenue report, this is based on the results from the 1st of April this year to the 31st of July. At the moment, as you can see from the tables included, we're looking at a forecast break-even position. But within the report itself, I have outlined a number of the pressures that obviously we are aware of as upcoming. And to give you a bit of context around that break-even position, that does include us utilising the contingency and reserves that we set within the budget for this year in their entirety, because of the cost pressures that we're potentially facing around things like the additional pay awards, and also the fact that at the moment obviously we've still got very high inflation and that is affecting our prices. So that's really all there is to say at the minute. We have had, obviously since this report since the period has finished, a couple of large contracts which will affect the results going forward, and we will look to make budget adjustments for those. But we do also know that we've got a number of other contracts which could result in additional cost pressures for us. So at the moment we're looking at a balanced position because we were very prudent when we set the budgets last year, but we don't know what's going to happen over the next 8 months. But we will come back obviously with anything which looks like it's going to affect that. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Councillor May.
Chair, thank you. Paul May from Baines. I was a bit worried when I read the papers because everything has zero movement, and in the real world I can't believe that that is actually the case. So I'm more than happy actually agreeing it, but I do think it perhaps flags up that have we actually got real monitoring taking place?
Yes, we have, yeah. So this is quite early in the year, so these results, sorry, I've switched mine off, are as at the end of July, and we know that things have moved since then. But quite often when we're early in the year, it's difficult for us to predict where those over and under spends are going to be, and also what you see are obviously summary level reports. So we've got movements underneath that between different categories, but what we're reporting overall is that we're expecting them to come in on budget. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more assurance.
So I think the point is we will approve it this afternoon, but we've got to approve it almost with the reservation that things are going to be changing as time goes on through the year. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? Yeah.
So I appreciate that you've said that the authority will be using contingency to achieve the balanced budget as of the moment, and you indicated that there are new contracts yet to be renewed or signed, and so unaware of those inflations. But to achieve the balanced budget, are you using all of the contingency funds currently allocated within the budget, or is there a greater reserve available? And then my real question is, do you at this point have a view for what the final position will be of the year? And I appreciate that there is great variation, but recognising that we won't have a balanced budget without drawing on reserves by the end of the year, do you have a view yet of what extent you'll be drawing down?
So at the moment it shows that we've allocated all the contingency within that report, but we haven't actually allocated all the contingency. So we have allocated 127,000, which will move in our next budget report, and we're looking at allocating some more of that around some of the issues that were discussed earlier today. But that still leaves us with a significant value in terms of additional contingency to cover any future contracts. But we also then have some specific reserves around things like the pension issue, which again we'll talk about later today, and also around some of our big projects. So transformation is funded from our reserves, so that's not part of this revenue budget. So at the moment, we're looking to use that contingency, and that will hopefully mean that we can keep our reserves other than the ones which we know we're going to use to look at next year. But yes, we may have to use some of those reserves. We do have it available, but at the moment we're looking to manage that within the contingency.
Any other questions, comments? No?
So the recommendation is just to note the latest income and expenditure forecast and revenue budget, so there is no decision to vote on, it's just to note the report.
Thank you. And item 11 is the 2022-23 capital programme update, and I think it might be back to you again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we have got within the report some more detail around the key areas within the capital programme, namely the fleet and premises. And we've also got, we had an additional request this year for some funding for a control project, which is a national project of £450,000. At the moment, that project has been delayed, so we're not now expecting that to be spent in year, but we are expecting both the fleet and the premises costs to come in on the allocation that was already set. And also we've got small amounts around IT and equipment which we're expecting to be spent in year. Just to highlight on the premises appendix 3, there is a K missing in the first part of it, so it should be 1988K is the year-to-date spend on this phase of the Avon project rather than 1988.
Sorry, can you tell which page of the bundle's that?
Oh, sorry, hang on a sec. Page 85, and it's in paragraph 1. There were also a number of questions which were asked at the annual general meeting, which we have provided responses to within the paper. I'm not planning on going through those responses necessarily in detail, but obviously if there is more information required, then Tanya has helped me to provide those responses, so we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. But at the moment, other than the control project, which doesn't look like it's going to happen this financial year, we are expecting the capital spend to continue in line with the allocation that was provided.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify one point that I didn't understand. In 5.7, which is the responses to those questions you mentioned, there's 4 bullet points down. It says that there will be an overall increase in revenue spend, but then it says that it is within budget. Can you just explain what that... Because I thought if there's an increase in spend, that means it's...
So this is what we were talking about in terms of the contingency that we built into the budgets. So there might be an overspend within fleet budgets, but we would have contingency within the overall revenue budget to cover that.
Makes sense, thank you.
Any further... Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Claire. I'm interested in how variance in the level of the value of the pound would actually change our capital budget, and how much we actually purchase from abroad, and if it's going to cause a major issue if the pound drops any lower than it is at the moment.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for that question, David. I would like a crystal ball, I think, sometimes to understand that. And I think it is likely to impact us and our costs. It's difficult to say how much at this stage. A number of what we buy, especially around IT, originally, although we buy in the pounds, where it is manufactured and where they come from is quite often done on dollars. That's also the case for some construction areas as well. So I am anticipating that there will be fluctuations. We're not seeing them yet, and that might well be because we've got quite a lot of fixed price contracts, so we're being protected to a certain extent because of that. But yeah, it's an ever-moving feast, and something my team keep an eye on everybody's behalf. And we, as you can tell, talk quite often to try and make sure that we're both aware of the pressures that are coming.
Yeah.
Chair, thank you. Can I just ask about the bath redesign, just to be sure that we are still, I appreciate it's unfair asking you, but are we sure that we're actually going to be delivering the bath station? Now the ambulance service is pulled out.
I'm not able to answer that question. However, I think Angie may be able to help with that one. So.
Yeah, Councillor, we're still really committed to trying to make the two service kind of model work for Bath, and we're working really hard with the police, and that's why we've done the work on the design. We are then at a point, I think, with the police where they are now needing to say whether they are with us or not on it, but certainly as fire and rescue, we are really committed to try and make that dual station work and continue to work really, really hard on that.
So is that a yes?
It's a two-party decision, so I think what I'm saying is we're certainly committed to it, the police are committed to it. Of course, we all have kind of budget pressures and priorities that we're both looking at individually, so I think that what we will be seeing is the police will be sort of saying whether they will or won't at this point, and of course, at that point, we will come back to Fire Authority about what it's looking like for Bath and the costs around that, because as you've seen, it's a very dynamic situation in terms of our capital programme and funding at the moment.
Can I ask a timescale question, really, Chair? When will we hear? Can you give us a sort of a approximate date when we would hear this?
Yeah. Well, we have a capital steering group coming up, so we'll be able to give some further detail on that one. But I'm anticipating in December, when you're having a paper come to you anywhere at the Future of Training in JTC, that there are linkages across the estate. So at that point, we will be able to give you an update. So that's what I'm looking at the moment, is around your next Fire Authority in December.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Can't see anybody.
So the recommendations to note the latest expenditure position on the 22-23 capital programme and to review any key issues to provide the required assurance on the approved capital programme. So it's just to note.
Thank you. Right, moving on, item 12, the forward plan 2022-23, and I think you're doing that, Amanda?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this I now do separately rather than a paper that says nothing to accompany it. So it's literally two pieces of paper at pages 87 and 88 of your bundle. And what it does, members, is it just highlights for you the next meeting dates in your diary and the key papers that you will be considering at those meetings. So it's just to give you a bit of pre-warning, really, as to what's coming up in the diary. Happy to take any questions.
Can I say I think this is really useful, thank you, Amanda, just to lay out when we can expect to be discussing certain papers. Everybody okay with that? No comments, questions? No. Right. Okay, thank you. Item 13 is the Local Pension Board annual reports, and I believe the Director of Corporate Services is presenting that one.
Thank you, Chair. This is a paper for noting, and I'm presenting it on behalf of the Local Pension Board, so the LPB Chair, Andy Cunningham, who drafted the report, which is in the appendix. Since 2021, the LPB produced an annual report which sets out the work of that board for the awareness of Fire Authority as the scheme manager, but also scheme members and the public, because the report is also published on our website. This annual report for 21-22 was approved by the LPB in July 22 and aligns with best practice in terms of the content and layout of the annual reports. Of particular note in the report for members is the LPB's involvement in the immediate detriment issue, including receiving updates, scrutinising the processing on your behalf, and where possible and appropriate, making recommendations to the Fire Authority on this matter. During 21-22 has also seen the appointment of the independent specialist chair for the LPB and also an internal pension advisor to assist with expertise in this area, and an increase on the training focus for LPB, especially given changes in the membership. You'd also see that the LPB receive regular regulatory updates. As you know, pensions is quite a moving situation at the moment. They also scrutinise the detailed pensions risk register, which sits underneath the corporate risk register on pensions, and they scrutinise performance areas on key areas of governance on your behalf. Plus, they have also done some work on communications on the prevention of pension scams. So therefore, the report is for noting, but for you as the authority and as the scheme manager.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
So with regards to the pension board, will they be reporting on any potential loss given the market fluctuation that happened? Because the Bank of England started buying up government bonds, didn't they, to prop up pensions? And I would imagine the size of this pension was drastically impacted. So then, given that we potentially have a shortfall anyway that we're always liable for, there's a new risk, isn't there? So will that be reported back to the pension board and then in turn to us?
Yeah, the pension board primarily look at governance issues rather than sort of funding and cost, but they do keep aware of issues around funding of cost, obviously within the regulatory kind of updates.
So is there a new risk then? So I don't know if you've... My question was, the Bank of England had to buy government bonds because trillions were written off pensions last week. And so that, given that this is a government pension, it would have been investing heavily in government bonds. So it would have lost significant sums of money as an investor. So does that then mean the pension has lost money, therefore will be turning back to us for further investment to prop it back up?
But it doesn't invest money, does it? It's not funded in that respect. Effectively, the current money going in is paying out the existing pensioners. There's no fund to manage as such. It's just a constant payment.
That's okay. I don't think I particularly answered it very well, so my thank you to Councillor Davies.
Any other comments, questions? No.
Councillor May.
Oh, sorry, Councillor
Sorry,
May.
Chair, it's me again. Just for the record, I'd like to record a declared interest. I'm on the board of the Avon Pension Fund, and that pension fund has been obviously looking at a lot of the pressures that have come, and a lot of the reporting in the media actually has worked to the advantage of the pension fund rather than the disadvantage. So I think it's actually it's quite a diverse inflation and everything else that I think you find that at the moment is relatively secure. But I thought I ought to record that, Chair, just for the record, please.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Appreciate that. Any more? Can't see anybody. No.
So the recommendations, you're asked to note the Local Pension Board Annual Report 21-22 prior to its publication.
Right, next item 14, Service Roundup, and I believe Assistant Chief Fire Officer Emery is going to present that to us.
Thank you, Chair. Members will remember this is a standing agenda item, and there's always the opportunity to ask questions before the meeting. However, I'd just like to draw attention to a couple of key points for awareness. First of all, members will be familiar with the challenges within our business fire safety team over the last few years with the building regulation review and also the increasing of the establishment within our building fire safety team. Nonetheless, at section 5.7, there's a summary of activity over the summer. not only in relation to Business Fire Safety Week, but also the production of an online video/learning tool for business owners. That was developed in-house by our Business Fire Safety team and our corporate services, and it's been adopted by the National Fire Chief Council and put on their website. So just an indication of it's not only going out and inspecting the buildings, but also the education of businesses that team support. The other area that I draw attention to is that at 5.29, members will again recall the Chief Fire Officer's 3 key priorities around the service plan, the HMI action plan, but also our cultural journey. And it's just worth highlighting the fact that the service has received recognition recently for its work with the Stepping Up programme since that first was established in 2018. In particular, the service received the award for outstanding contribution, but also our Diversity and Inclusion Manager, Richard Stokes, received the Rising Star Award for all his work within the community in raising diversity profile and awareness. So again, just 2 parts of the report that I'd just like to highlight. Any questions, Chair?
Thank you, that's really good. And can you pass on our congratulations to Richard as well?
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Yes, sorry, Ben.
Thanks, Chair. Steve, just want to pick up on the where are we? The children and young persons sessions that were held in Yates, and also the Ukraine Day. They were both received really well. Can you just pass on my thanks to everyone involved in that? Because I know that so often we only see the fire services literally coming to your door to put the fire out, but quite often it's a lot more than that. You know, the work that you do in the community is really valuable at the end of the day, and you know, those sessions were very, very well received by Yates, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I will do, Chair.
Yeah, that's good to hear, thank you. Any more comments, questions? Nope. Okay, well, thank you for that update, Steve. And item 15, the next one is the immediate detriment update. Yes. Director of Corporate Services to present.
Hello members, this is a paper coming to you for a decision, and I'll go through the recommendations after my introduction to the paper. As you know, this is a highly complex and dynamic situation, so it usually works better if I take you through the paper before then returning to the recommendations. Before I go into the presentation, an apology for 2 errors in the final paper. On page 107, paragraph 3.6, the number 23 should be 22 as it appears elsewhere in this paragraph. And on page 122, paragraph 5.20, the secondary legislation on tax was or is expected in autumn 2022 rather than 2023, 2023 being the date that the government are expected to deal with all of the secondary legislation. As I say, I will now go through the paper. To date, the immediate detriment provision, which has been put in place by this authority, has enabled 22 impacted pension scheme members to retire under legacy scheme terms. In accordance with the legal advice that you took at the time, all of those retiring under immediate detriment are required to sign an agreement called a COT 3, which is contained for your reference in Appendix 1. This agreement means that scheme members sign up to the fact that a decision to take immediate detriment without the legislation being in place means there are uncertainties and potential future financial liabilities for them, including in respect of personal tax. However, what isn't then passed on to scheme members are other tax charges which would not be incurred if they had remained in the 92 scheme, and the compensation for that is either for the employer or for the government, depending on when that is applied. Members will also recall that at its meeting in June 22, a decision was taken to pause ID processing for forthcoming retirees, except for a small number of pipeline cases. This pause was pending further information on the financial implications for the authority and therefore local budgets following the Treasury information received in April 22, which has previously been provided to members. The financial implications were to be calculated using a ready reckoner, which was provided by the LGA on the 20th of June 2022. The calculations in the ready reckoner are heavily caveated because they are based on estimates which may not cover all eventualities, some of which are unknown until the legislation is in place. However, it remains the financial model that we have. Since the June meeting, considerable work has been carried out by Finance, HR, the pension and payroll administrators to apply the ready reckoner to our retirement profile. As a result, and as set out in the paper at the table at paragraph 4.9, the potential cost to the authority of resuming immediate detriment for all eligible forthcoming retirements, retirees who are reaching age 50 with 30 years service between now and October 23 is estimated to be in the region of 470,000. 17 of the 44 people in this category are 40% taxpayers, which contribute significantly to the figures. In addition, eligible staff at age 50 who reach 25 years service could also seek to retire under immediate detriment in this period. And if so, there is a potential further cost of around 130,000, although this data is being further analysed. And however, the pattern to date has been retirements at age 50 with 30 years service and not at the 25-year service point. The basis for these costs are set out, and how they're calculated is set out at paragraph 4.5. And you will see that the ready reckoner contains what the LGA believe to be the potential costs on an employer arising from the HMT and Home Office position in respect to compensation for a contribution holiday, possible compensation arising if the HMRC takes a particular view on treating the 2015 contributions, offsetting them against the arrears for the contributions for the 92 scheme, and where applicable, additional charges to be paid to the administrator to process these cases. The £470,000 cost is considered a worst-case scenario, as not all of the 44 in the ID category reaching age 50 with 30 years service may choose to retire over the next year. And they may also have other complications, which means they can't be processed under the Fire Authority's current arrangement. And if they are processed, not all the potential costs may eventually be applied by government. And you will have seen that the HMT note contains a lot of coulds in terms of the tax implications. The costs associated with resuming immediate detriment are in addition to the cost of around 84,000, which has already been incurred in the period between November 21 and June 22, when the Home Office removed funding, but ID processing continued in the service. In terms of potential funding sources for these costs, the pensions reserve has been identified as a potential option. The reserve currently contains 577,000. However, as identified in the paper, there are potential implications of using this reserve for these purposes. It is, in part, set aside to cover the costs of ill health retirements above the number profiled each year. Therefore, if the reserve is used in full or substantively for immediate detriment, the authority would potentially have little to no resilience for such costs, further costs arising from ill health retirements or other emerging pension costs, which would then need to be funded by the baseline revenue budget. Using the reserve for immediate detriment would also mean it is not available for reallocation for other cost pressures. Members will also be mindful of any potential direct or indirect impact of utilising the reserve for immediate detriment on future precepts. There are, however, potential cost implications of not resuming immediate detriment processing, and because this increases the risk of legal action based on arrangements not being in place to address the age discrimination findings. Legal cases are always costly, and a few authorities have had legal claims in process. It would also increase the risk of multiple internal dispute resolution complaints, so IDRPs, which also have a cost in member and officer time, as well as contractor costs if payroll or pensions are required to assist. As I always emphasise when I bring immediate detriment to the authority, considerations on immediate detriment are also not just about cost. And this remains an important and emotive issue for many staff. A decision to continue to pause immediate detriment for forthcoming retirees doesn't mean those affected are left without a pension. They would receive a pension on retirement. However, through an issue which is not of their making, they will receive a lower pension until the government resolution. And while there will be at that resolution and with backdating, the lower pension initially can impact on decision-making about retirement, as well as family income in the interim. As an illustration of the interim financial impact on an average firefighter, this is set out in paragraphs 3.4 and 3.5. And members will also be acutely aware of the difficult timing in terms of the current industrial relations environment, albeit that relates to national and not local issues in respect of pay. Moving to other key updates since your meeting in June, the Pensions Ombudsman, so the TPO, has issued a fact sheet in July, which is Appendix 2 to your report, which sets out the process for dealing with immediate detriment complaints or disputes, which is informally first, then IDRP process and appeals, and then the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman have also confirmed that their general position on ID complaints is that they would not investigate complaints or disputes relating to remedying age discrimination in public sector schemes because they are aware of the government's work and intentions. However, they would look carefully at the facts of each case before making a decision and investigate when there is potential maladministration or a failure to look at individual circumstances and therefore on the application of a blanket approach. The TPO position has informed to the recommendation in the paper in respect to any decision to continue a pause in immediate detriment processing. At the time of the report, there were no further substantive national updates. However, as immediate detriment is a dynamic situation, there have been some further updates since the drafting of the report as follows. Following that July TPO fact sheet, on the 30th of September, the LGA reminded scheme members of the Ombudsman's compensatory powers. So if the Ombudsman decides to investigate an allegation of maladministration in respect of immediate detriment, and they find 4 scheme members, they can, as well as financial redress, award a compensatory payment for distress and inconvenience to be paid by the employer. Potential examples of maladministration or failure to investigate on a case-by-case basis where there has been sufficient attempts to explain or engage, consideration of severe financial hardship or other serious injustice. The compensation is usually up to £2,000 per individual, but can be higher in exceptional cases. Nationally, the FBU have confirmed they would support cases not being progressed under immediate detriment to make such claims to the TPO. The Scheme Advisory Board have also written to Treasury again following their April letter, seeking further clarification and answers to questions they believe remain unanswered. There has not yet been a response from Treasury. As covered in the paper, we have not yet seen the Treasury secondary legislation, which is due to deal with the tax implications of remedy, was anticipated to have at least been consulted on in autumn-winter 22. However, at the end of September, the LGA informed scheme managers that it seemed now unlikely that tax changes contained within that will be able to operate in isolation of other secondary legislation and therefore before October 23. In the meantime, the LGA have updated the guidance which sits alongside the LGA FBU MOU and framework based on the March-April sort of HMT note, and the amendments update the financial risks arising for scheme members and scheme managers in respect of tax. This authority has not yet adopted the MOU framework, which you will remember extends ID processing in particular to retirees, but the amendments are relevant because they include a disclaimer. And the disclaimer says that the spreadsheet, so the Ready Reckoner as described, has been designed to provide fire and rescue authorities with a basic estimate of their financial exposure. It does not cover every eventuality, and it is based on the LGA's current understanding of what the main financial liabilities could be, taking into account the recent statements from the Home Office and HMT. Fire and Rescue Services will need to carry out their own calculations of the actual sums due to any member wishing to adopt the framework, in respect of which the LGA assumes no responsibility or liability. More generally, in respect to the economic environment facing the authority and local budgets, members will be aware of the Chancellor's mini-budget announced on the 23rd of September and its potential implications for future cost pressures and fundings. Finally, in the paper, I have pointed to bringing the matter to the December Fire Authority to reconsider the adoption of the LGA FBU framework, and looking at this as a commitment which was previously made to the Fire Authority. And it may be that at that point the framework has been changed because the LGA are working with the FBU, or we might have further information from the Scheme Advisory Board and a response from HMT. Hopefully that takes you through the paper. As I say, it is always a very complicated and dynamic situation, and the recommendations then for you to consider as authority are as follows. First of all, to review the potential implications and costs of pausing or resuming immediate detriment processing for forthcoming retirees, together with the funding options and noting the caveats contained in this paper. Decide whether to resume immediate detriment processing with immediate effect by utilising the pension reserve and further revising the current legal agreement, which is the COT3, signed in ID cases to ensure employees understand and accept the potential personal tax liability if they choose not to wait for the government resolution. Or, in the alternative, decide to continue pausing ID processing pending any changes, legislative or otherwise, which would reduce the potential financial impact on local budgets. And in the interim, and again noting the position of the TPO, signpost forthcoming retirees to how they raise exceptional issues, such as severe financial hardship, for the initial consideration of the Chief Fire Officer and myself on a case-by-case basis. And finally, note the developments since the Fire Authority meeting on the 22nd of June, which now includes my further updates from today, and most notably that fact sheet from the Pension Ombudsman, which outlines their approach to immediate detriment cases. Thank you, members, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Would it be helpful if I remind members of the legal position before we take questions? Only because you have had detailed legal advice previously, but it's not in this paper. So you instructed me a year ago to get advice from a specialist barrister, a QC, on this topic, and he advised you at that stage, I'm conscious that some members weren't here then, that the government had left fire and rescue services in a really awful position without legislation to fix this problem, and that we should only process claims and be exceptionally cautious, so only present those claims in the clearest and least controversial cases. And he had a list of criteria that fell within the Home Office guidance. So if it was a very easy case to calculate, he said that would be okay, but if it was more complicated by reasons of tax, he recommended that they weren't processed. Now, the problem you've got is that legal advice was given when there was a Home Office guidance in existence, almost encouraging fire and rescue services to pay. What's now happened is that Home Office guidance has been withdrawn. So if I refer you to paragraph 7.2 of your paper on page 123, I've said there that since the QC's advice, the legal landscape has changed significantly, and I can't overestimate that. So the financial risks to you as a fire authority are much clearer. So particularly bullet point 2, HM Treasury Information Note issued on the 29th of November 21 included the following words: therefore, HMT and the Home Office do not advise that schemes progress pipeline immediate detriment cases before the legislation is in place. They then withdrew their previous guidance in November 21. And then if you go over the page to page 124, We had an LGA advice letter which said that the legal basis for making payments does remain valid but recognises the significant financial risks and uncertainties now facing fire and rescue services. HM Treasury then wrote a letter to the Scheme Advisory Board which states the government's view remains that processing immediate detriment cases before all the necessary legislation is in place could give rise to significant consequences for schemes and pension members. And then the NFCC circulated a letter to Chief Fire Officers on the 25th of March summarising HMT's letter, which is in the bullet point above, but also passing on advice from the National Police Chiefs Council, and that advice was scheme managers should not be implementing immediate detriment at this time as there is no legal mechanism to pay without undue risk to both members, that's pension members, and the force. So I mention that because I think it's a useful recap that we had very clear advice previously, and then the position has got progressively worse as every time the government has issued something. So if I take you back to the recommendations, and I think if we take questions, then we can discuss those recommendations.
Sorry, Amanda, it might just be helpful. Within those documents, it does, however, stress, and this is why it's a fire authority by fire authority decision, that it is a decision of the scheme manager to make. And so that is recognised in all of those documents. So they might kind of stress that, but ultimately it is a decision that remains for the scheme manager of the fire authority under the governance arrangements.
Councillor.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for a very clear paper on a very complicated subject. It's really helpful. I just wanted to check my understanding, essentially, that the table of potential costs in here, which has got, I think it's a total of 58 potential retirements, that's going up to next October, is it, in the next 12 months?
Yes, I think that is in the paper. It's the
I thought it was. I was trying to find it again.
October. So it's from. Yeah. It assumes that starting from tomorrow until the end of October.
I'll just try and hold my line of thought for a minute.
That's the first time it's ever happened to us.
That should be okay now. Should get another now.
So the risk to, assuming we agree to go ahead and use the pension reserve, the risk to the revenue budget then is this potential 107 at the bottom, plus the cost then of any unfunded ill health retirements. Is that correct?
So if it's only the people who are aged 50 and 30 who then retire, and this is assuming all of those go, which I said is kind of like a heavy caveated thing, it can all be afforded within the pension reserve.
Yes, so not the worst case if the 25-year people all go as well.
The extra 106 comes into effect if all of those in the 25 kind of year category also retire. So the implications for the reserve are, if you use it, so taking aside the 25-year ones because that's not been the pattern to date, if you then use all of or almost all of the reserve for immediate detriment processing, if you have extra ill health retirements in a year, you would look to need to fund those from revenue.
Yeah.
And you won't be able to use this reserve for other things. Say, for example, some of the new pressures.
Yeah, sure. So I guess where I'm trying to get to with this is, given that these retirements are potential retirements are over the next 12 months, that's obviously through 2 financial years, it's reasonable, is it, to assume that, assuming we drew down all the reserve first, the hit to any potential revenue hit is looking into next year's budget, which hasn't yet been set, it's unlikely to hit this year's budget. Is that a reasonable?
Yeah, that's correct, because we actually don't know what's going to hit our budget until the secondary legislation is in place. So it's all very sort of if, buts and maybes, but what we're trying to do is use that ready reckoner to give you almost like what would be the worst case scenario, what the impact would be on the budget for which we would need to make kind of provision.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get. So the revenue budget that we've just looked at today, which is this year's revenue budget, isn't particularly at risk from this, but next year's could be.
It could be, albeit you've heard from the revenue that there are lots of issues, potential issues arising within this financial year as well.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just, I was sort of looking around the room whilst you were doing your presentation. I think it's gone over the head of some members in this room. You've put up a set of recommendations which says either or. So can we be very clear on what you're actually recommending? Because I'm not certain at the moment. I know what I would be voting for.
I'll let the Director of Corporate Services answer as well, but my view is that, as Angie mentioned earlier, it is your decision. We can't decide for you. So we had to present to you the various approaches you could take. So what we were hoping was to have a good dialogue in this meeting where it would naturally flow that one of those recommendations was your preferred option. I'm sure the Chief and the Director of Corporate Services have a gut feeling for what they think would be a prudent approach, but I think we were hoping there'd be a bit more discussion first.
Yes, I mean, I think we've had these presentations every meeting, don't we now? And it seems to get the same but different each time. I guess the situation we're in was we're no clearer now than we were in June, and we agreed in June to follow a certain course. I don't think we're greatly disadvantaging any member who's entitled to their pension. So I personally would prefer we continue to do what we've been doing, which is looking at the cases which are in hand and have to be dealt with, rather than trying to second guess things for the future and actually getting it wrong, which could be to the detriment of not only the fire authority, but equally to members of the pension scheme who may end up incurring significant tax disadvantages if, based on what we're doing. I think what we've done so far has worked okay. I've not heard any particular noises saying it hasn't worked, and I don't hear anything in this report that tells me we're any further forward to make a difference to that. So my personal preference would be to continue as is and wait for more guidance to come forward, but colleagues are probably more learned than I am and can advise.
Don, just to be clear, we did pause at the last meeting. So what you only agreed last time was to process the couple where quotes had already been given. We're not in that position today. So we either continue the pause or we don't. So there is a slight distinction, just to explain.
So I was going to say, I've just heard what you've said, Amanda, but I'm in agreement with Don that we're still no disrespect. I understood most of what I was told. But we're still no clearer because the legislation doesn't exist, so the risk still exists. So I think it would be prudent to either continue the pause or certainly look at options C and D, but we have to be, there's still a massive degree of uncertainty, and so to control the risk, I think that's the only thing we can do.
Thank you, Chair. Would I be right in thinking we're not asking for advice from a QC anymore because the landscape is just so random at the moment, nobody can actually predict what is going to happen?
Yes, that's right. So well, two factors. One, the QC we first consulted has sadly passed away, so I can't go back to him even if I wanted to. But also, I think the legal advice is always heavily caveated because we're waiting for secondary legislation, which hasn't been passed. So it's trying to get advice on an event that hasn't happened. And all he will say is, you've got all these government documents saying there are financial risks until the legislation is in place, particularly around the question of tax. And he won't be able to give you any way of getting around those risks without waiting for the legislation. So I didn't want to spend more public money on an advice which I sort of knew what it was going to say before it arrived. And I think that was probably the right decision.
If you want to go. Okay, thanks. I would, with respect, disagree with what members have said so far. My preference would be option B, to resume processing. And a couple of reasons for that. I understand the financial risk involved in doing that. That's very clear. I think what is different now is we have some idea of the scale of that, although it's obviously uncertain, but we've got more idea of that than we had 3 months ago. Equally, there is risk in not doing it as well, in terms of the potential for legal action, industrial dispute and so on. So I think that those risks are balanced. But as Andrew said, it isn't just the cost. I was at Avon Mouth Station this morning actually talking to people about this. And because the way we've done it so far is sort of to proceed a couple of months at a time and say we'll go ahead with these people, but not for those people. And what that is causing is a huge amount of uncertainty for those people who are presumably in that group of 40 odd looking ahead to the next year. At least if we go ahead with this decision today, with an understanding of what the risk is and with a plan for funding most of that, at least what we're doing is we're giving people some certainty for the next 12 months of where they stand, as much certainty as we can, given that the situation keeps changing. So I would go for option B.
Thank you. Ben?
It's just to give my opinion, because we seem to be discussing this at every single meeting, and there is risk and there is pain for everyone involved if we continue pausing. I think that there's a greater risk and possibly even more pain if we unpause without the legislation that we need to really make a proper decision. So my opinion would be that we keep the pause as we go, because at the moment we don't have enough information really. As Angie's done a brilliant report, but in terms of having the complete information that we need, it's not there, and it's still not there. And we can't solve that. We can communicate with the people who are going to be affected, but I think if we do unpause without this legislation, we're leaving ourselves open to possibly greater pain financially. And when budgets are already stretched at the moment and things only seem to be getting worse, I don't think that we should be putting our residents in that position, despite the hurt that it is going to cause to those that are being affected.
Obviously, we're still in the middle of kind of member discussion. I would just kind of re-point out the TPO aspect in terms of of continuing the unpause. Which is that this is all about managing a whole series of risks to which there is no one clear pathway through it. But I think that the TPO did inform the aspect of the recommendation around that if member decision is to continue with the pause, that we do have a provision to consider case-by-case circumstances, which is slightly different to what we had before, because we just looked at people in the pipeline, but there aren't really people in the pipeline now because you're paused. So my recommendation would remain to members that if you do go for the option to continue to pause, that you do, in line with the TPO, enable a facility for case-by-case discussion, so you're not storing up other kind of risks through that TPO approach. But I think members are still kind of in discussion of which recommendation that you would be going for.
Can I just mention one other thing, just so that no one's overlooked it, is that we need to be aware that all these calculations that are done before the legislation are likely to have to be recalculated, because we're making calculations based on assumptions not set out in regulations. So there is a point of double processing that goes on, and also in terms of, I think, Councillor, for your point, the uncertainty, what the firefighters won't have is certainty about their tax and other liabilities. So if they take the money now, before the legislation, not only are we uncertain about the consequences, but firefighters will be as well, because they might get a nasty tax bill later on if the tax regulations don't align to what we've applied on their behalf. So it was just to bring...
So I do have two questions for Angela. Do you know a timescale for the legislation? Has that been clearly defined yet? And secondly, do you also know what the majority of other authorities are doing?
So the first one, the government have indicated that all secondary legislation and all the software and everything that needs to be done for remedy, not only for this group but for actually all the other people who are affected, will be October 23. They haven't released anything different, so that's the best information that I can give you in terms of October 23. The position of different fire authorities is very difficult because it isn't nationally collated or kind of presented for a number of different reasons. However, I do know that our Chief Fire Officer talks about this kind of in the NFCC, so can give you an informal flavour of that. And I know that the Chief wanted to come in at this point anyway, so...
Yeah, thanks, Angie. In relation to what other authorities do, it's depending on the level of financial risk to them, and it varies. There's no sort of consistency in how they're approaching. Some are processing Category 1, some are processing Category 1 and Category 2, and I'm not quite sure how they are doing that. Category 1 are those colleagues that are currently in employment and taking the option to access their pension. Category 2 are those that have already retired in receipt of their pension that have been affected by immediate detriment. And there are some services that have paused. And of course, as I said, that's very much managing risk around the financial risk, around the number of potential retirements. Angie's sort of highlighted our worst case scenario of up to 44 members of staff within the next 12 months. And of course that then determines the individual scheme managers, the level of financial risk that they're exposed to. So it's very, very different from there. If we were predicting 3 people between now and next October, that might be a different level of risk for us to consider. I think this is a difficult one for authority members and scheme managers, in that we're faced with the potential financial risk of an unsecured reimbursement, if you like, of the costs associated with processing in the next 12 months immediate detriment under Category 1. So that's one risk we're trying to manage and mitigate against. As opposed to if we were not to process and pause, the risk of claims into the authority, and as Angie has pointed out there, the TPO announcement around the potential financial fines on the authority. And I wonder if it's worth debating the merits of option C, which helps us to manage those risks along the way between now and October with regards to the impact of the TPO, the financial impact on the authority and the reserve that we've put aside by looking at it on a case-by-case basis so that we can take a pragmatic approach with the signed declaration of managing those risks as well, and potentially enhanced wording within there to manage that risk even more, but at least enable us to make an assessment of how we manage that risk on the authority's behalf.
Thank you. In the event of us unpausing the immediate detriment, do the people who've had their pensions paused have a legal case against us to say why we shouldn't have paused their accounts?
So, potentially, when you agreed the pause, you did, however, agree for to continue to proceed with the ones in the pipeline. And I think we have had then some representations which we have looked on a case by case of people who weren't in the pipeline but thought they had kind of special kind of considerations around that. So I'm not aware of, I'm not aware of potential claims coming in around that. But you know that there could be people who are out there who feel in that kind of position, and I think it's part of the kind of risk almost with if you continue the pause, that people could have a claim around that, because of course you continue to process immediate detriment when the Home Office removed their funding, so they will see a difference. I think that's your more likely risk in my view.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you for your clarification. My question is, as we mentioned our pros and cons of this issue, as there's risk and also implications. So what percentage of assurance can you give us this afternoon? Thank you.
Yeah, and as I say, that it's difficult to give kind of assurances, because what we're trying to do is find a pathway through a series of risks, a number of which cannot be fully quantified, I think when I come to members, I'm trying to give you as much information as I possibly can about the issues and about the risks and around your options. But it's very difficult to give you an assurance around one option versus the other than what I've already contained kind of within the paper.
Chair, one question and I think possibly a proposal. This is a situation that's affecting, if you like, all fire authorities. And the advice that we've got there, in my view, is you continue with the pause, but that you then build in a bit of flexibility. Is there anything to indicate anywhere else that judicial reviews are being considered in other areas? Because it's a level of judging the risk that we've got to take today, but it strikes me that the sensible approach is to stay paused, but to give flexibility if it's needed.
I'm not personally aware of any judicial reviews, but what I am aware of is that there are a number of fire authorities who have had claims in respect of not processing immediate detriment and therefore not having that provision to deal with the age discrimination bit before the government aspects. I'll hand back over to the Chief in case that he's aware of any judicial reviews. But the FBU have very much kind of said that they are collating information on services who aren't doing immediate detriment with and have intentions of raising claims on their members' behalf.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a judicial review, similar to Angie. I am aware, as Angie has highlighted there, claims against authorities and scheme managers on a couple of test cases that were settled out of court. Or agreement was reached between the claimant and the scheme manager out of court. I'm not aware of what that settlement was, so I can't give that to you. I'm just aware that had taken place.
Any further comments? No. So, you need us to come.
Do you want a proposal?
Well, I was just going to say, it sounds to me like we've got a difference in opinion within the room as to which recommendation you want to go for. So I think we can take A as accepted, review the potential implications and costs of pausing or resuming ID processing for forthcoming retirees together with the funding options and noting the caveats in the paper. So it's basically you've reviewed what's in the paper. So I think everybody's comfortable with that. And the last point, I think, is also something that probably is non-controversial. So to note the developments since the Fire Authority meeting on 22nd of June, which was your AGM, most notably the fact sheet from the Pensions Ombudsman dated July 22, which outlines their approach, which is Annex 2, I believe. So the bits that I think we probably need to vote on are B or C. So is that what you were going to suggest, Councillor? Sorry.
Okay, well, yeah, I think we're probably about to propose totally different things here. I was about to propose, and I think I know which way it's going to go, but I was going to propose option B.
Yeah.
Just again on the basis that at least if we do resume, we can quantify the risk. If we don't, we're facing a risk that we can't quantify. And I would rather give that certainty and at least know the risk that we're facing. So that would be my proposal, is we go with option B.
Okay.
I would second option C.
Okay, so what do we want to do? Two separate votes? Is that easier?
I mean, I think you probably just got to go around the room and take B or C, because I thought I'd actually got in the recommendation around C with that flexibility in, but we've got an alternative of B, so I mean, I think perhaps just do a vote around the room, Chair. I don't know.
So let me just read out B and C just for clarity, that everybody knows what we're voting for. Sorry, Councillor. Yes.
Can you quote which page number it is?
Okay. So we're page number 115 of your bundle.
Just to to be sure everyone's on the same page.
So B, let's take a vote on B first. So B is decide whether to resume ID processing, so noting that we're currently paused, so resume ID processing with immediate effect by utilising the pension reserve and further revising the current legal agreement, COT 3 at Appendix 1. And let me say quickly that we can't give you the final wording for that today, but we'd undertake to revise it on your behalf, okay? So revising the current legal agreement, COT 3 at Appendix 1, signed in ID cases to ensure employees understand and accept the potential, and I think where you insert the word personal tax liability there, if they choose not to wait for a government resolution. So that's option B. So do you want me to read out C as well, or just B at this stage? So it's okay. And then option C, so in the alternative, is to decide to continue pausing ID processing pending any changes, legislative or otherwise, which would reduce the financial impact on local budgets, and in the interim, signpost forthcoming retirees to how they raise exceptional issues such as severe financial hardship for the initial consideration of the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive Officer and Director of Corporate Services on a case-by-case basis. So that was C. So let's take a vote on B. So the B is to resume ID processing with immediate effect by utilising the pension reserve to pay for that and further revising the COT 3 agreement to be signed in ID cases to ensure employees understand and accept the potential personal, that's how I've changed that resolution, tax liability. So it's not Fire Authority tax liability, it's personal tax liability, if they choose not to wait for the government resolution. So can I see a show of hands for who's in favour of that resolution? So this is B. So Councillor Hopkinson and Councillor Smith, anybody else I've missed? Okay. Right, and C then, in the alternative, decide to continue pausing pending any changes which would reduce the financial impact on local budgets, and in the interim, signpost forthcoming retirees to how they raise exceptional issues such as severe financial hardship for the initial consideration of the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive Officer and Director of Corporate Services on a case-by-case basis. Can I see hands in favour of that, please? So what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I've counted 11. Did anyone else count? Can you put your hands up again, just so I can make sure I got it right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, that was 10. Oh, you did that deliberately. Oh, my God. Okay. So that's more than half. So I think, are we comfortable you've carried option C? Okay, right. Can I also take, please, is everybody happy to vote for resolutions A and D, which is basically to note the potential cost implications set out in this paper, and D, to note the developments which have happened since June? Yes? Is everybody happy with those? Okay, we got there. Is everybody happy we've made a decision on that? So I think what the Chief Fire Officer and Angie will have to do now is to create a communication which will explain how individual members can raise their concerns about severe financial hardship so they can be considered on a case-by-case basis, and that will then recognise the Pension Ombudsman's concerns. Okay, super. We got there. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That was always going to be a difficult one. Now, item 15, we have an additional item after that, which is emergency business.
Yes, members, I'm sorry to add a new item to your agenda, but as you heard from the chair earlier, the Treasurer has decided to leave the service on the 31st of December. And I was asked to raise this emergency item with you by People and Culture Committee this morning. And what they've asked me to raise with you is that you should determine, please, and we'll take a vote, to undertake a recruitment process for a new Section 151 officer under the Local Government Act 1972, as that vote by you as a full fire authority is required under the Officer Employment Procedure Rules. So if you vote in favour of that today, and by the way, the law determines you must have a Section 151 officer, so it would be logical that you vote for that today, then you can just ask People and Culture to, as usual, carry out the recruitment process. The reason I'm raising this as urgent business today is you're not due to meet again until December, and we don't want to wait to start the recruitment process until December. So I'm sorry it wasn't on your agenda. I didn't know about the resignation until now, so I've obviously just raised this as urgent business. Has anybody got any questions from me before we take a vote? Well, I'll get it proposed first. But any? Adam? I'm happy to propose. Okay. So Adam's going to propose. Can I have a seconder?
Second.
Brenda? Okay, thank you. Any abstentions? Any votes against? Everyone in favour? Good, thank you very much. That saved us an extraordinary meeting, so thank you very much. Okay.
Right, in that case, our last item on this part of the agenda is for information. The date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 14th of December, 2022, at 1400 hours, and the venue this time is going to be Severn Park. And I've been assured it will be warm.
Yes, we hope.
We hope.
If they've paid their gas and electric bill.
Oh, God. Yeah, right. We might have to have a whip round. Bring your own heater and fur coat, I think. Yeah. Right, so I'm just going to read one last bit. Exclusion of the press and public. To resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business on the grounds that they contain exempt information pursuant to Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972, and that in accordance with Schedule 12A, Part 2, Paragraph 10 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So we're going to stop recording.
So you're going to propose?
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to propose that we move this. Can I?
David,
thank you, second. Can I see those in favour? Yeah, anybody against? No. Okay, any abstentions? No. Right, thank you.